Hello, everybody. Shuko here with part two of the Dancer Guide. Now, one thing I'd want to point out is I'm in my log house on the second floor because we're going to be doing some, probably some sub job changes and things. So I wanted to make sure that I was in somewhere accessible to do those things. The first thing we're going to talk about today is macros. So I've shown you my hybrid page. One thing I would point out is back when I first started playing Dancer, I used 20 or more equipsets and every single button that I could get on a book. So I eventually landed against this. There's a strong strength to minimalism, and it can really help you be more efficient and consistent. And the more grand you make your plans, the easier it is to mess up by, forgetting to change one piece or something like that. And I found, especially since the release of Odyssey gear, that there's a lot less need for certain specific pieces of gear. So that being said, let's go over some of it. I'm going to do some general notes first. In particular for Dancer, I use 4 primary pages and a few secondary pages. Blank. Secondary pages. And so 4. Now some people probably think that's absolutely crazy. One thing that I would encourage to point out is I do adjust certain macros if I need a specific weapon skill or something like that. I'll copy over my Rudra or something else like that I'm not working with and bring it away and then put in something else that I'm working with for that battle. So there is some minor adjustments, and none of this is really set in stone. And you can obviously adjust based upon your needs as well. So the thing I would point out that I use as the logic in a lot of my macros if I ever start doing guides on all the other jobs I play is I try to keep anything that's healing on my left page, which is the top, and I try to keep it on the left side. So since Dancer has the waltz, I will wind up positioning all the waltzes here. And I also tend to do that for my white mage with all my cure spells on the primary pages that I operate. So that's one logic that you'll see in a lot of my macro design. And then my weapon skills, or at least my primary weapon skills, I usually put on the right side of my right page. And sometimes I'll sneak a couple secondary weapon skills that I'll use for skill chaining on my other page so that I can go back and forth very quickly. Then in the middle, I tend to have job abilities and things that I may have to flip to quickly, such as Violent Flourish, No Foot Rise, Reverse Flourish, so I can quickly access them and then get my positions back to my healing macros and my weapon skill macros so that I can quickly hit them when necessary. On my right side of my right page, I usually would have things like Evoke or a buff I use frequently. So, an Animated Flourish for evoking, Hey Samba, primary buff, Meditate if I'm sub-samurai, which happens a lot, Saber Dance. So the reason that this page has Saber Dance is I call this my DPS page. When I use my weapon skill, it switches to a set that is my DPS set. So it'll switch my gear and then right back into my DPS set instead of my hybrid set. Whereas I go down 2 pages, that's my hybrid set, switches into my hybrid weapon skill and to my hybrid set. Now, like I said in my prior video, I don't use gear swap, so I'm going to be explaining it through equipsets and written macros. So let's get back into my macros. Now, what I tend to do is under my hybrid set, I have sub-job abilities or things that I use infrequently, but are still something I may need to access quickly. So my sub-monk attacks, Climactic Flourish, Tornado Kick, very good by the way, but you need to be sub-monk for it. Dragon Kick, you need a specific weapon for it. Asherin Fists, you need a Karambit for it. Counter Stance, Chakra, Chi Blast, Charge Up, which would be Focus, Boost, Dodge. I pop them all at once. Then on this side, I would have my Sub-Dragoon stuff, such as Jump, High Jump, Draconic Circle. Super Jump, if you have the master levels towards that, was also one you would have here. Actually, I should honestly rewrite my Jump to be Super Jump. Then I have Chocobo Jig and Spectral Jig. So a lot of times what I'll do is when I'm on my main page, I'll dip down one, hit my Choco to go super fast, back up to my main page. Or sneak, and then back up. Then I have my weapons changes, daggers, swords, depending on what I'm using. Striking Flourish if I ever need it in rare chance. If I'm sub Rune Fencer, Lux to get myself runes up. Usually Lux can help prevent with Charm and some very annoying things. Steadfast Tonic. So temporary items are things that you write a lot, and something I fight often is Kieran 2.0. So having a button that you can hit quickly to activate these things is literally life and death, or winning sometimes for some of the hard endgame. Unusual weapon skills I don't use often, Dancing Edge, Shark Bite. I'll usually copy paste these over to a primary page if they're necessary. Or sometimes I'll even come down here and hit them if it's an infrequent use thing. Tractor. Once in a while I'm sub Dark Knight and farming keys with people. So that's a nice button to have around. But yeah, essentially I keep my sub job abilities down here. Then in the middle page between my DPS page and my hybrid page, I have my sub ninja abilities, because a lot of times if I'm going DPS, I would be more sub ninja, needing to access my Uchisemis very quickly. My sub thief stuff, such as Flee, Steal, Special Stun, which would be from Dark Knight, Dark Knight job abilities. And then I also have the Spectral Jig and Choco Jig. My 1 hours, which I usually activate both at the same time. And I activate putting on my JSE head to give myself longer time with trance. Now, if you don't have this thing, don't think of it as the end of the world. And honestly, you only really need the plus or the reforged version to get it to be enhanced. Grand Pause, I've already talked about a lot, but you'll notice the wait one after to make sure they all go off. Honestly, I've done 0.5s and sometimes they do, but a lot of the times wait one is much safer. And it fires much more accurately. Other things I would point out, on this top portion, you'll see some sub-warrior stuff, such as Voke Defender. This is if I'm sub-warrior and having to pull something, like Goblin Ambuscade, for instance. Warrior job abilities, Warcry, Berserker, Aggressor. If there's a real warrior there, I'll just delete the Warcry one, because that ruins their savagery. Don't use sub-job Warcry if there's a real warrior around. Treasure Hunter 4. I have 2 Herculean pieces with Treasure Hunter +2 on them after many years. Wasim, he's very random. So I make sure I put those on. And then I can tap something once for Treasure Hunter 4. Range Pool. I rarely use this, but sometimes if I'm doing like grinds or something, I need to get something from far away without a job ability aggro or a spell aggro. I can throw on and ruin my TP, put on a hoop, and pull that way instead. Sneak Attack, Trick Attack. Honestly, you really just need Sneak Attack and Trick Attack separated, but I have it there because you can wind up activating one and hit the weapon skill before you Trick Attack, and then that's on cooldown, and then you can use Trick Attack. So I've tried to save buttons sometimes with unusual setups. Third Eye for Samurai, Swordplay for Sub Rune Fencer, Panacea, Remedy, and Holy Water. These are really important ones I want to point out as well, because these are the 3 things you're going to find yourself drinking as any type of DPS or even a tank situation to save yourself. And so I have those essentially right under my healing pages. So I drop down 1, medication. And then from my page of my hybrid, I would go up. So that's me describing my setup, essentially, for how I have my things positioned and why they're there, simplifications, my 5th page down is partial. I just have some emojis and stuff, but a lot of times or I'll move certain things down here to dance with them, or put like Ruger Storm here if I'm using a separate weapon skill on my main pages. So I try to keep that logic available where you can keep track of things a lot more if you're keeping things, not overcrowded with book changes and page changes. You want to look at the core of specifically what you're using to accomplish your goals and utilize that. And some things can also be done from the menu, like the rare instances I need the Wild Flourish or something. There's no gear changes that aren't going to improve. Another thing that I would point out is if you look at Chocobo Jig, you'll see sometimes I have things where I actually list the equipping of the piece. That was a way to essentially save on equip sets. Some things you only change 1 or 2 pieces of gear, and if that was the case, I would usually not even bother creating an equip set for it. But this is what I would wear when I jig, so I can maintain my high-speed run, and then to make sure the jig lasts longer. So that being said, essentially my weapon skill macros are switch to weapon skill set, weapon skill, weight 1 in carrots. That's a new feature, by the way. We used to have to dedicate a line to weights. And then right back to the set. Now, in this case, that would be the hybrid set. Climactic Flourish would be combined, and I usually do that to make sure it actually hits, because sometimes if you attack a bunch of times in a row and you're super hasted, you may spend your Climactic Flourish on regular strikes. So, job ability, Climactic Flourish, me, weight 1, Ruger Storm, and back to hybrid set. Now I have a specific set for Climactic Flourish, which we'll get into in a moment. Building Flourish, doesn't need anything fancy there. My steps macros, I have Presto get activated with a weight 1. I do put on my JSC shoes to make the cost a little lower. And then I have the step with a weight 2 into back to the hybrid set or DPS set. And essentially all those macros use the same, but I will point out with the feather step that there is a different JSC you would use to make it have 3% more of critical hit evasion down. Stutter step. And quick step, which use the relic feat instead of the Empyrean. Fan dance. And for this I would put on the bangles, which would give me a little bit more. Honestly, I can't say I see a massive difference when I put them on, but every little bit counts. And then back to hybrid set after Fan Dance is activated. For Hey Samba, it would be the relic head, the artifact head, and that winds up giving you, I believe, about 1.5 minutes extra once it's fully upgraded. Now, one thing I'd point out is some of these you'll see where I have 2. Flash and Animated Flourish. A lot of times I don't have finishing moves initially, so Flash I have set first. And then that has, cooldown based on fast cast, so if I'm rapidly pulling, by then I'll have steps built up, and Animated Flourish will go off instead. So that's something that I wind up using like a double macro. You'll see me do this a lot with my mage macros if I ever do a tutorial on that as well. For my waltzes, I have equipped to waltz set, waltz with an ST. The reason I do that is so I can actually see the arrow on the party or alliance if I'm moving to alliance. I play a lot of events with alliance, and I see that STPT would prevent you from doing that. And STAL, you can't see things in the selection as easily. And then back to the hybrid or DPS set. Essentially, all those follow that same rule. Reverse Flourish, I have the Wildkeeper Reeve cape go on, and the Empyrean Hands to give more Reverse Flourish bonus. And then with a weight 1, and then back to the hybrid set. No Foot Rise, that one I have with the bonus piece on. The hands, the relic hands. And then that usually gives, I think, a 50 or 150, I think it's 150 weapon or a TP when you have it on when you use No Foot Rise. Or it's 50 per merit. So actually you can get up to 250 if your No Foot Rise is capped. But for me, it gives 150. Violent Flourish. And I do have a set specifically for, well, it's the magic accuracy set, but the Empyrean body actually does enhance this considerably. So I do put that on my magic accuracy set for Dancer, which we'll get to. And then same thing with weapon skills, Generator, so on and so forth. For 1 hour, it would be the Relic Head. And then with other job abilities, you just write them in. Everything essentially has to have a 1 second switch for equip sets. Job abilities can be half a second apart, but sometimes they don't accurately fire. For some of my stuff with Summoner, believe it or not, I still do actually have to have half-second stuff for it to properly work. Or Ranger. Now for Utsusemi, I would point out, here we go. I would point out for Ichi, I have some things from the Windward's Cancel add-on to make sure that I cancel any shadows I have prior so that the Ichi can actually take effect. Because if you try to cast Ichi and you even have one knee shadow up, it'll fail. Now, you don't have to do this. You could just, count it out and time it perfectly. But it is something I like to have just to make sure. Item use macros. In particular for Holy Water, I do have a Holy Water set. You get up to 85% chance of Holy Water working, and it's very effective unless you're muddled, which prevents item use. Other stuff is pretty much just its macro. No special set switched or anything. For this one, for Saber Dance, I do try to put on some Treasure Hunter pieces as a pre-marker, just in case I forget. So that's another way you can sneak in Treasure Hunter if you're not in a very dangerous situation. One other one I would point out would be Pirate Cleos and Striking Flourish. There is a bonus from the body piece, and it's the Empyrean body piece specifically. And this would be one I would use in certain situations for opening up with, like, say, a Mythic. Or even if you're just trying to build a skill chain based on that one's properties. But honestly, you're going to get more from Ruger Storm or Sharkbite with Climactic. But sometimes you still need it. So essentially that covers my macros for Dancer. So now let's move over to the equip sets. So essentially I use style ones, and then I have universal ones. One of the universal ones that I use is called Light Enmity. And this is the Enmity set I use for Dancer. I'd originally built it for Dancer first, and then as I started playing other jobs, I realized, oh man, this set works for like a ton of them. So the Halatus Helm, which I believe is from a one of the Wardens in Escher Ruan that can pop randomly from the Lessers. The Emmet Harness, which is a JSE, or I'm sorry, a UNM body piece that can be gotten in Bucine Glacier. The Curie's Gloves, which is a Guy's Fate drop from the T3 in Escher Ruan. The Zor Subligar, which is a UNM drop from Zeta, the original Zeta. And then the Ahosi leggings, which are incredibly hard to get, but they come off of Sha from Risenjima. Now in accessories, you could technically make an ambuscade cape. I did originally at some point, but it's not often that I need Enmity, nor do I find this Enmity set serves me pretty well. So I did eventually change that Dancer's cape to do something other than Enmity. And I use the Age of my cape, because a lot of jobs can equip it. For a belt, I use the Sinew belt, but there is a couple other belts, such as the Trance belt, which would do better, for Enmity specifically. But the Sinew belt does plenty good as well. For Enmity on rings, I use the Tonberry Grudging ring, and the AOS ring. But there is a couple other options like the Provoker ring, and I believe a ring from Diablos and Ifrit both have 5 Enmity. There's a couple other options with slightly less. But, you don't have to, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You're really trying to get the entire set just to have Enmity for a moment, and then you're switching right back into your primary set. For earrings, I have the Cryptic Earring, which is from Vagary. And if it's Vagary bonus and you have a Link Shell or you're multi-box crazy, You can run it and trade in all the boss's death items for any item other than the body, and that's an item you can go. But it does drop from the slime floor. The Firamosi earring, which has enmity +2, that's a Wildskeeper Reeve drop, and sometimes there are bonuses where you get coupons for that and can easily just claim it. But it also tends to sell for 500k to a mil depending on the server. The Unmoving Collar comes from a UNM Marlboro in Yatunga Jungle, and it has enmity +10, and if you start to aug it, it gets a lot of HP as well. So it's very good to use for this kind of set. Next set I would show is Holy Water. You can also use a Purity Ring from Zeta Guy's Fate, Belladonna, or not Belladonna, the Gnat, I believe. The giant gnat drops it. But I use 2 Blenmont rings, which have a teeny bit more potency, and then a Candor neck, which comes off of the Mimic and can be bought from the auction house for way too much now, but it's expensive and worth it now. It's still pain. I got it back when nobody cared about it. It was like 50k. But yeah, when Shinru came out, the price went up considerably. Blenmonts are crafted, so you'll have to find a crafter or look in the auction house for those. And NQs are good too. You know, you just want to try to get what you can to start. Fast Cast is a set, I use for Utsusemi, and I call it Light Fast Cast. Herculean with already has 7 on it. I believe I have an augment of 6. So that's 13. Orin Mila has 5% fast cast and is all jobs. That comes from Meeble Murrows. Loquicious Earring comes from Limbus, and it has 2%. Enchanter's Earring has 2% and comes from Walk of Echoes, or you can get it from the auction house. The Rehab Ring is 2% and can be found in Guy's Fate Ruan from the Taru Archangel. Prolix Ring has 2% and I believe is from Abyssia and can be found from the auction house for a pretty reasonable price. Leyline Gloves come from Sinister Rain, and in this case it has 5% and I believe a little more from the augment. Yep, so you get 8. Dredjupan I use 7%. There's another one that you can wind up getting. The Dredjupan is from a high tier battlefield. But another one I would suggest also if you're using it specifically for Utsusemi is from the Warder of Love and Escharuan. There's not a lot of good belts with fast casts for dancers or many melee jobs, so that's blank. And then I have a fast cast cape. Moving on a bit here. The Treasure Hunter set, which I do have here as well, just to remind where my Treasure Hunter pieces are. And a lot of jobs can use it as well. Sub Waltz, which is a sub job waltz. Dancer doesn't use this, but that's the jacket I was telling you about Utsusemi. So I came in here to show you that. And many jobs get to use the Dashing Subligar, not just Dancer. And they do get the Shadow. So a lot of people get to use this. Potency of Waltz effects receive 9% from the Ambu Head. This is 1,000 domain points. A lot of jobs can equip it, though. And then the Rawhide has 6%. So, yeah. I wouldn't, again, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. A lot of times you want to keep on your regular gear. I am aware that the mini expansions have a waltz timer down too, but switching to that gear even for a moment in this hard content will get you killed. It broke my heart to have to pull it off on my sets, and I still have it, but yeah, until something changes with that, or they make a modern upgrade path for it, it's going to be tough to fit it in things like Odyssey. Now I move over to my next page, and originally, like I said, I used to use like 20-some for Dancer. At the moment now, it's a little over 10, I believe. Not counting my universals. We're going to start with the counter one, a real weird one. Switch to Karambit. Crepuscular, that's from Shinryu's High Tier Battlefield. A DT ring. This gets DT3 when it's fully auged. Genmei Earring is from Genbu 2.0 and Escharuan. And it's counter +1, DT2. The Bathy Choker is also gets counter. When it's auged, I believe it's counter 10. And then you also can even get counter on the Galeti head. So that gets a lot of counter once it gets some growth points into it. Then I try to treat it like a DT set with the Ashira harness. You don't have to use the Ashira. You could use Niame or even a DT set like the Adamar or DPS set. It depends really on how much damage you're taking for the content. The Horus Bangles JSE bundles actually have counter +6 on them for Dancer. It's unusual, but hey, I'll take it. Defending Ring, Moonbeam Ring, and then Yame with a Sailfee belt to make sure that I get haste capped. And counter on the cape as well. So when I use counter stance with this, I'm actually at cap counter. It's pretty useful, but rare situation needed. Magic accuracy set, I would use this for if I'm sub-scholar trying to sleep things or trying to violent flourish stuff. So Niame is highest at magic accuracy. I believe I've tried it with the Malignus. That might give me a little bit more, but I seem to have better results from Niame. And then the Horus cast boosts it as well. And then things like the Eshen Stone and the JSE neck, or even the neck for 1,000 or 100 domain points, is good. That has some magic accuracy on it as well. Something like the Enchanter's Earring or the Dignitary Earring. There's also other earrings from JSE Zeta that'll take you a little bit further on magic accuracy. Like, let's take a quick little poke, huh? Hermetic Earring has 7. And I think I have... Oh, we're just going to switch it for the Hermetic Earring for now. Pemphedra Tathlum has 8. So, this is essentially just one you're trying to... And I use sticky earrings. You know, there's very expensive, but even NQs or... There's other things with magic accuracy you can use till you get there, too. But I use these on my mages and a lot. They're very useful once you can get them. Dancer's Heal. So, there is a lot of JSEs that'll get your heals higher. But one thing I found is you die a lot and find yourself having to repeatedly waltz on yourself. So these were the pieces that I found to be the best to get me where I needed to go. The feet from Relic. And they give 14. You get 10 for End of Shadow from the Dashing Subligar. Then Yame Hands for protection. Yame Head for protection. And then the Artifact Body actually gives a Waltz ability delay -2. So that's huge. And Waltz Potency 19. Waltz Potency Receive +8. So that's all huge. Lastly, from the JSE, I get a Waltz Potency +10. And the Cape. There's other things I could have put the Sylphoran Earring in here instead. But really you're trying to get to 50 and some Waltz Receive, which I get from the headpiece. Another one I would suggest is you could do the Ambuscade +2 head here to get a little bit more out of your waltz. So there's different things that you can adjust. Survivability, you'll notice, is very key in a lot of my sets because I do a lot of very hard content that can kill you in one hit. My Climactic Flourish set, one of my favorites. This is the most dangerous set I'll wear even in hard content. So the Empyrean Ammo has Dex +5 and 5% critical hit damage plus. The Empyrean Head has a critical hit damage +25%. And then it has critical hit rate +1. What that means, because you're already guaranteeing a critical hit, is it actually gives you another attack round when you use Climactic Flourish. So that's amazing. You can get up to 6 rounds of guaranteed critical hits when this is on, when you activate it. So that's one thing. Then I have the Atoli Gorget on. Now, one thing I'd point out is you're like, that doesn't look like any attack sets. But once it's augmented, you get a lot of stats, including physical damage limit +10%. You don't always have to go +2 on a job unless you really, really love it. In fact, this is the only +2 I have. I use a lot of +1s, but Dancer is one of my favorite jobs. And as much as I love White Mage, I didn't think I needed to go past the NQ for that one. Then things like the Moonshade Earring with its TP bonus, and I believe I have attack augment on it as well. Even though it's 4, that adds to it. The Ishvara Earring, which Dancers don't get things like the Thrud Earring, so 2% from that. Oh, sorry, jumped out of the set. The Regal Ring, which is a tough item to get, but one thing you could alternate this with instead would be the Odyssey Ring, or one of the Omen Rings from the lesser guys that have attributes plus, because you're really trying to raise your attributes at a certain point. The E ring, which is from Mimic, it's like 60 mil if you want to buy it that way. There's also, again, of the rings I said prior. So this isn't a mandatory, but it's nice to have. The artifact hands have the weapon skill damage plus 10% and a lot of other good stats. The ambuscade plus 2 body has critical hit damage plus 6% on it and lots of good attributes and high accuracy, with a physical damage taken of -8, which is pretty key to keep it help with survivability. Then I put on the Fotia belt. Sometimes it will give me, free. It doesn't help a ton with damage, even though you see weapon skill damage plus 10. It uses different math. It uses FTP's old math. So things that hit a lot, like evisceration and things, it'll do a little better on. But I tend to put it on there just to get the free weapon skill a lot. On my back piece, I have weapon skill damage plus 2 or 10, damage taken 5, dex 30, accuracy 20, attack 20. Then the relic feet are the damage plus 10% piece for Dancer. Most DPS jobs usually get 2. One from the relic set, one from the artifact set, and I suspect we're going to see one from the Empyrean set that's coming out when Sortie comes out in a week or 2. The Herculean boots is one I've happened to get an absolutely stupid augment on, but there is a couple other pieces you could use. But in this case, I use weapon skill damage plus 8, critical hit damage plus 3, and lots of other good stats like strength plus 14. And yeah, so I got lucky on this one. I would suggest using a Niame in this place if you have augments on it, or even if you don't, it'd help your survivability. And there's really high stats on it. But if you got a half decent Herculean piece, you can put it there. Or there's even from the Alluvian Skirmish set, you could get a little weapon skill damage from that as well. So moving out of the Climactic Flourish, Evisceration, or my critical hit rate set. Essentially, it's Galetti's now, which is the Odyssey set from the fish fight, which is, I can't remember his name at the moment, but the giant shark. The Enforcer's Harness drops from Wraith Air, and that's a very rare drop, but if you don't have that, the Galetti set piece there is good too. I use the Fotia neck and the Fotia belt. The belt is from Abyssia, and the neck is from Sea. And then a critical hit rate cape from Ambuscade. The Hedatory ring, which is from a T3 in Resenjima, Guy's Fate Path. And that has critical hit rate plus 1%. And then the Tonberry's Grudge. When your Tonberry hates max, this gives you 5% critical hit rate. The Odur Earring, which is 5%, and that comes from 1,000 domain points in the Dragons from Norg, Zurium specifically. And then the Shared Earring, which is something I use for attributes and stuff. There's a couple options you could use here, but I specifically like this one. And this comes from a mid-boss in Omen, particularly the long-legged Craver. Aeolian Edge, which is a magical-based weapon skill, and it's one we use a lot with cleaves lately, if you've seen seeing a lot of videos. So for that, I pop on Niame on everything except the Herculean boots with that crazy aug. And then I'll use a Shiva earring and E-ring. But you should also switch out with things that have magic attack bonus, things such as that. Anything like that will boost it. The Firamosi earring, and then the Moonshade earring for the TP bonus. Now, the Voracious Resurgence has introduced Nation necks, and the Windy neck has int plus 10 magic attack bonus plus 10. So that's very good for weapon skills like Aeolian Edge. And then the Eshin Stone drops from the T3 in Zeta, and it's really great all jobs all around belt for when you're trying to do stuff like this. And then I have a magically oriented with intelligence cape. I call this the hybrid weapon skill set. This one's pretty much the Niame pieces with the 2 JSE to keep myself alive a little bit more. Flume belt instead of the Fotia with its damage taken down. Same cape. And then a D ring instead of an E ring with the Regal ring still paired. And an Onoe earring for the HP plus. and the damage taken minus stuff, including the AUG one. Still the Moonshade ring, it's too good to get rid of. And then a Crepuscular Pebble instead, because the damage taken still with bonus stuff. And physical damage cap plus. So it keeps you a lot safer. You're not dying as often, but you're still getting a real good chunk of damage off. Regular Rudra Storm. For this, I use the Galetti mask, the Galetti body. If you have good augments on Herculean, that'll also work. The 2 pieces I've already talked about. And then the Relic Feet. This is the one that winds up boosting closed position by a lot. So it's very good to use, honestly, even in a weapon skill set, believe it or not. Photia Belt. And then E-Ring, you know, all the stuff you have seen already. Except I'll point out this one. This comes from Esets High Tier Battlefield. And Dex plus 10 is really good. So in this case, it's good for Rudra when you're not forcing a crit to try to raise your Dex as high as you can. Exenerator is a weird one, but I do have the Aeonic Dagger. And it's agility based. So we're back to that ammo, which happens to have agility. And then I go Sherida, Odir. Honestly, I still stick with a lot of things, but I do put on the Illibrat to get the agility from that. And you do get agility from the Regal Ring. This would be my DPS set. I wear this whenever a tank can hold hate and guaranteed not to be... I'm getting hit by AoEs or magic, or I'm just doing like CP or something more casual. So the Adamar bonnet, you can get it in NQ or HQ. It comes from 400 domain points or the T2, or I apologize, the T1 of... Actually, no, it's the T2 of Guy's Fate and Escher Ruan. It drops pretty rarely, so I would suggest you spend domain points and save yourself a lot of money. And just be patient. The crafting portion also, the part can be like 50k to 100k for an NQ. HQ is going to probably set you back 10 mil plus. I use the Relic Body plus 3. It has physical damage taken plus 6, or minus 6, and resist amnesia, which is something I really love, and triple attack 4. So it's essentially a really good one. But you could use the Adamar here as well. Speaking of Adamar hands plus 1. You get triple attack from these and lots of other things. The rate of critical hit. So it's a great one to have. The Sailfee belt winds up having 2 triple attack and 9 haste. But once it gets auged, you get another 5 double attack and 15 strength. So it is an excellent belt to invest in. Now the Samanua tights, they drop from Sinister Rain. And they're okay, but really you need a max aug to make them worth it. That is what a max aug looks like. And then next, I've already talked to you about the Horos toe shoes and the bonuses that they provide. So that is definitely in my DPS set. I will point out that something I forgot to say in my video before is you need to be standing in front of the monster for closed position to take effect. The Gary ring drops from High Tier Battlefield Odin and has triple attack 5, strength plus 10. It's incredibly rare, incredibly hard to get. An Epona ring, or there's lots of rings that you can wind up with. The Pervacare ring, or not the Pervacare ring, the Petrov ring. There's a couple rings you could use to get a little bit of double attack or triple attack. The Hedatori ring. Speaking of the Epona ring, the Sherida earring, which I've shown you before from the Omen mid-boss. The Telos earring drops from Order of Courage. But another one that you could get here is from the High Tier Battlefield in at the bottom of Tavnazia, Ultima and Omega. It's called... Let's see if I can actually pull it up. I have it here. Essence earring. That's a really good one to use as well. There is a crafted earring that has quad attack on it, but it gets very expensive. So you really gotta start to think about what's worth spending 100-something mil on when you could get a whole relic almost, or half of a relic done for the price of one piece of gear. You may have to start thinking about things a little bit differently. Now this ammo drops from a T1 in Odyssey, particularly the Zolahan, and it's really good. And it starts to aug decent too, with a little bit more attack and things, but it's not the best thing to focus on augmenting. Really, there's base stats, which makes it so excellent how many jobs it can equip. And then the cape is a double attack cape with accuracy. And Dex to give a little bit more accuracy, PDT 10. Because when you have Shell 5 on you, you actually do get magical defense, or MDT, 26%. So you don't need as much MDT or DT as PDT really is the most important stat to fill once you have, 20-some% of MDT. Now, it does still leave a window for breath damage, but breath damage is pretty rare in most cases. But if you can get DT solid, go DT solid. If you're stretching, at least get PDT. Next set would be my hybrid set. And this will be the final set that I talk about. And I probably have a lot to say about this. So I've already shown you the ammo. And the Niame helm, in this case, I have mine currently at rank 18, which means I've won a V15, and I'm still... Essentially, I've spent a lot of my points trying to help people get unlocked, so it's not something I'm rushing towards, but I do get double attack 1 from it. So that does make it a little bit worth it on this set, to still get, protected so much, but still have double attack. And that's Path B, Niame. Yashira's Harness, which drops from Jin. It's an incredibly rare drop. So the Malignance would do here, or the Niame as well. Malignance Hands, which drop from Lilith, High Tier Battlefield. And that's very, very, very rare. It takes many tries. I still haven't gotten the head, essentially, after hundreds and hundreds, probably 1,000+ fights. The Defending Ring. That drops off of the original King Behemoth. It's pretty rare, but lots of people are selling their Savory Shanks for their mules, login points, and stuff. And I would try it, 2 or 3 times a night. 134 tries later, oh yeah, finally got it. And every time somebody says they got it on their first try, I die a little inside. The Gear Earring, it's just so good, it still goes on my hybrid set. Telos Earring with its accuracy and its store TP. And a little bit of double attack, it's nice. Shared Earring, still so good. So I try to keep most of my DT and Mava in my armors. And then I let the double attack and multi-attacks kind of come out in my accessories, especially because I can Saber Dance. Sailfee Belt, already talked about that. Double attack, ambuscade cape, oh yeah. And then the Warder's Charm. The Warder's Charm actually will absorb magic, I believe, about a quarter of the time. So it is incredibly strong. And then it also has Elemental Plus, except for Darkness and Light. So I love to have this as my hybrid set. But if sometimes I find myself coming a little short on damage, I'll switch to my JSE. So that being said, essentially I've shown you all my macros, and I've shown you all of my equip sets. Now I'm going to go a little slower over things with the equip sets. As I've already said, you just need the equip set and then the number. You can rename it as long as you remember the number and put the number down. If you change the equip set, one of the reasons I like that is I'm just like playing with paper dolls. So I'll look over my sets and be like, what do I need to adjust? Oh, let's look over my dancer stuff. Oh, is my counter set good? Oh, you know what? We can change that. A couple features I would point out is you have change name, copy, paste, delete, use current, which means the set will be put in or whatever you're wearing as armor, equip, and of course style lock. Have a couple dedicated for that as well. But that's pretty much everything I have to say about the equipment and the macros. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot them out to me. These would be what I specifically use now currently for most of my events for Dancer. The next video that I'm going to be talking about, I will get into sub-job selection. And there's a lot of that. But I feel like we've already covered a lot on this video, and I don't want to overwhelm everybody. So for part 3 of the Dancer video, we're going to talk about sub-jobs and how they play and what events and what situations you would want to use them in. So that's going to be a whole separate conversation because frankly, you could use almost any of these sub-jobs. So thank you guys so much for following the Dancer Guide so far. I'm going to continue this next week as well, and we'll talk about that. So take care, everybody. And again, I really thank you for joining me on this adventure.